Putin has pledged a harsh response. We're already seeing some evidence of that. But previous warnings from the deputy head of Russia's Security Council that any attack on the Crimea bridge would trigger Judgment Day. What could they have meant by that?
Well, the Crimean bridge is vital to two things. One, the resupply of the Russian troops, especially in the southern part of Ukraine through Crimea, and Russian capability inside Crimea. And the second thing is it's such a big project that is in Vladimir Putin's own personal area of emphasis, because he's the one that set it up, he's the one that opened it, and the attack that destroying the bridge was on the day after Putin's 70th birthday. So from a credibility perspective, from an information perspective, it's a huge blow to Putin personally, but it's also a massive blow to the logistic supply to Russian troops who are still illegally in Ukraine.
And what about the response where clearly Ukraine is now counting the cost of, many civilian areas having been hit? We were just speaking there to Mr. Poroshenko at that kids' playground. The indications are that the Russians still have this capability of long-range missiles.
The Russians do have a massive capability of long-range missiles, but I think what we're seeing here today is two factors. One, they don't care whether they hit civilian areas, and actually they actively target civilian areas to try and create terror amongst the civilian population, to try and therefore undermine the political support that there is in the country, and to undermine international political support, but also the inaccuracy of the missiles. Many of the missiles that are being used are highly inaccurate. They're not precision weapons as we in the West have provided the Ukrainians, and you get this sort of effect. And what the Russians are doing is committing war crimes. The UK Security Minister, I think, has just called Russia out for that, and I think he's completely accurate.
What does the international community do about that? The international community, many figures, including our own Tom Tugendhat, saying what you have just said, that these are war crimes. What do we do?
Well, what we have to do is redouble our resolve to support Russia. Russia is this isn't going to stop here. Russia is holding its Security Council meeting today, chaired by Vladimir Putin. They will carry out more attacks inside Ukraine, across Ukrainian cities. They will increase their information operations and potentially carry out other activities to try and fracture international community support. If ever there's a time that the international community needs to redouble its resolve, come together, increase the supply of weapon systems into Ukraine, modern weapon systems to target Russian military, and to continue to target areas that are of vital military utility to the Russians, including the Crimean bridge, again, if the Russians manage to repair it and get it open.
And what about that equipment in detail? Clearly, we've had some very advanced battlefield artillery that we've supplied, and it seems to be very effective. But what about defensive capability with these missiles coming in? Is there something that we could give the Ukrainians to make their skies safer from these missiles?
Yeah, the Ukrainians successfully intercepted, by their own statistics, 41 of the 83 missiles that are coming in. We can give them more air defense capability. The difficulty is we're not going to be able to ever give them enough air defense capability to cover all of the cities across Ukraine. So there will still be areas that remain vulnerable, and the Russians will still be able to identify those. So giving more and more air defense capability will reduce the number of missiles that are successfully hitting Ukrainian cities, but it's not going to take it away completely. We need to balance that with giving the Ukrainians the capability to redouble their offensive operations, to push Russia back even further, and get Putin to the breaking point. We're already starting to see cracks inside Moscow. We need those cracks to get bigger, and for Putin's regime to break completely.
Our Prime Minister and fellow leaders of G7 nations will hold crisis talks on the situation in Ukraine tomorrow. What more do they need to do other than talk?
Well, the talking is important, and the messaging that comes out of it is making sure that international community piece is solid. Putin is attacking the cracks that there are in the international community in the support that there is for Ukraine, and will continue to do so. The international community needs to come back and say it's solid. We need those nations that have promised to supply weapons potentially early in next year to bring that weapon supply forward. We need more money going into Ukraine. We need increased international pressure on those countries that are still supporting supporting Russia, in particular China, India, Pakistan, Iran, North Korea, and keep pushing them to get off the fence and find against Russia and recognize what Russia is doing is illegal under international law.